This is the back cushion, and unfortunately it has seen better days. The little puppy managed to do quite a number on this. Now I do need to keep the piping, which means I am going to have to cut or trim around very carefully so that I've got all of that piping. Hopefully this too has been sewn with the nylon thread. I'm going to have to ease in. I'm cutting into the back of it because it really doesn't matter. I'll just cut as close as I can all the way around, not through this fabric here. That's keeping everything in place. I've just opened this pleat here and it looks like it's the upholstery weight thread, which means that I'm going to have to very carefully undo all of these threads. This is a slow, time-consuming job. With a bit of luck, by cutting one of these sides, it will undo both. So I'm just going to cut the stitches on this side. And really carefully, because as I say, I'm reusing the piping. I got most of this out. Now this was interesting. Somebody has actually stapled the pleat in. Don't ever do that. I have been asked to work with this fabric. It's quite pretty actually, but it has big patterns. I've just folded it in half so that I can get a front and a back out for the back seat cushion. I think I've got most of this fabric pulled out so it's even. I'm going to be using this part of the fabric for the center. How to get my center, I'm going to fold the top back down to where the original bottom came to. This folded underneath, so I don't want to go too far down. And then I'm going to just fold it into quarters like that. And when I have that, like this, I'm just going to cut that little piece out like that. That's my center mark. If I was to be using this again, I wouldn't cut a hole in it. Now I'm going to work out where the center of this pattern is. Now that usually takes a little bit more effort and I have to measure it. It goes all the way from here to the top of here, which is 23 inches. That's a very long area to take into consideration. I can alter where my center point is. I think the easiest way of doing this, so I'm going to fold this fabric back out and just follow this center fold. There's many ways of trying to work this out. My center fold here is going to go down the center of this pattern, which is quite easy to follow. And I think that I'm going to pop it here, which means when you look at the center of the back, this is going to be here. Open that out and I'm going to just put a few pins in to hold it in place. Fold it upwards like this. Here's my center mark, and just make sure that my cross section is in line too, like that. And therefore I'm going for the top of this pattern here and here. Once that's in position 2, I can fold it down and pin everything into place, and it should come out nice and even. Something else you got to remember to do is fold out any previous seams like this. If you're unsure, cut one side out first and then cut the other out. I mean, this doesn't line up very well. And just remember, the old pattern is rather used and abused, so it's not necessarily going to be straight. It's quite wrinkly even though I'm pulling it out. And just to check the top is in place, fold this over, cut your little V here. I have got a feeling that I'm going to have to keep my up and down mark in line rather than the side marks, but that's okay. That sometimes happens. I'm going to have to straighten that up. Anything that's odd can be changed later. Using old patterns aren't always as even as you'd like them to be. You just nick it. Yeah, this has to move. I'd much rather you learn by my mistakes and have some pointers on how to correct things. Now, the more I look at this, I'm going to get frustrated with it, so I'm going to show you another way of making a pattern. I'm going to just clip all of this across in one go. I'm going to go higher than the pattern suggests. I'm actually going to go straight across. I'm also going to cut this in half too. Now that I've cut my 2 pieces, I'm actually going to unpin this side. I'm going to go back to the old-fashioned method of measuring. I like things to be nice and even. I'm going to measure 3 points along here to get the average width. Probably help if I do it in inches at bigger increments. At the bottom it's 23, midway point 23, and across here as well. I'm going to just run my 11.5, which is half of 23, along this line, cut one end. So this is going to be going up the center of that pattern, just like this, all the way up. This is really because I couldn't get the pattern to be even on both sides using the original cover. Having done that, I'm going to measure the other side also at 11.5 inches, putting my ruler on the halfway point and cutting up 11.5 inches. It's easier if you do it either side. It should come out even. Now we know that the width of this is even all the way up. Unfortunately, the fabric is slightly twisted, so I have to choose which side of the original cover I'm going to use to create the corners, which means I'm just going to pop this and pop it in half and make it fit like that. I think what I'm going to do is use this side. I'm just going to cut this in half. You're better off trying to make things even than sometimes working with originals. Here it is. As you see, the lines aren't straight. We were going to be fighting a losing battle on making that cover the way I thought we were going to be able to do it. Line up the center mark here to make sure all of that's correct. And it's just a little bit rounded there, not too much. Just going to push that down. This fabric will stretch into place eventually. Line up my center mark with the center of the new fabric. I'm not going to push it down anywhere else. Lower that by an inch because I'm thinking that's where it would be safest to go. Cut round the original shape to this, and it was slightly rounded, not by very much, so I'm just going to put that in too. We now have a matching top. I've just got to get the bottom to match as well. Pop that there. And before I actually finish it, I am going to just fold that part under where the zip would be all the way across like this. Just make sure that where I want the center is exactly where it should be. And looking at that, that will go over the top. We have this part of the pattern which is here in place as well. Straighten that along the bottom, like that. That's quite a generous amount to go into the zip. I'd much rather be too generous than not have enough. I will roll it just a little bit more and cut straight across. It looks twisted. We've given one twist up for another twist, but we'll be fine. The difference is this one is more of an all-over pattern, so we wanted these pieces to be equal and these. And with the force of the cushion inside is going to pull it to where it needs to be. Now all I've got to do is cut out the second one. The easiest way to do that is to place the one that needs to be cut out underneath, the new one that was cut on top, just like this. Line everything up as best you can, and if it doesn't line up, like here it doesn't want to go, just lay it on top and cut where it needs to be cut, and you can alter it as you go around the cushion. And bring it out to match all of this here, brings it to there, and it matches here. So here we go, we're just going to cut this on out. So I'm going to just pull it into place here so it follows this line just like that, and up we go. Do it section by section. It's the easiest way. When you get to the top, just make sure everything is lined into place like that, and cut your new top out. If you need to pull that down, that's fine. And then on the last side, just make sure that all your pattern is matching and cut that out too. Sometimes we have to make things work. The only other part we need to mark in is where the bottom of this cutout is. So I'm just going to lay that on there like that. Straighten that to the top. It's easier to do it from the top down rather than the bottom up. The bottom up might change. And I am just going to put a little nick on that side, just at the bottom. I'm going to use this to match it up with the other side. And there's my flower. My corner. I only really need to do it on one of these, so I'm going to just flop that one down like that, because I'm going to put the piping in place on one side and then I'm going to make it match on the other. There we go. So that should be equal. The first thing we need to do on these cushions, put the corner pleats in. You can see the shape. What I'm going to do is fold that in half like that so that I can cut where the center is, like that. Only a little ways down, maybe 1/4 of an inch if that. With the right side, you take the first corner here and put it into the center. Make sure that all of your edges are in line. Pop it underneath and start sewing just beyond the fold like this. then the other fold into the corner, and it can overlap slightly, but I don't usually overlap it by very much because it's all bulk, but at least so that it should be even at about 1/2 inch out, so that it involves a little bit of overlay, but not very much. And carry on sewing and repeat on all 4 corners. So you've got 2 on each side. There's my top corner. Fold it into the center. Make sure all of the outside edges are in line. Pop it down about 1/2 inch before the fold. Sew across the second corner, you fold in. If it overlaps a little bit, that's fine, but try to make sure that it's closed at the top, and then there again, make sure all of your outside edges are in line, and carry on across. Now the other thing that I have marked out is where the zip needs to go, and it's a generous allowance. It's 3/4 inch. Usually I don't allow that much. Pop that underneath like that. I'm going to use continuous zipping. The slides are separate. It makes life a lot easier if you're doing this as a business. I'm going to move my pin. I'm going to separate it because I actually don't need both halves on there. I'm going to pop that right to the end of my fabric. It's probably about 1/8 inch in from the edge, which is pretty good. I'm just going to sew one side of the zipper in place. I've got it on a 3.5 stitch length. If you've got a pattern, you can invariably go from pattern to pattern. I used to always iron the fold in, but years have gone past. I do less of that kind of thing. But if you want to iron it in, you can. And when you get towards the other end of your cushion, just snip right across for the zipping, because that's the amount you're going to need on the other half. And sew to the end, and then repeat on the other side. Measure it up. In this case it was 3/4 inch. Put the other side under like that, and just try to even it out as best you can as you sew across. I've spoken to you before about the piping foot. This is a 1/4 inch. It has a groove to allow the piping to be sewn through quite easily. I always put for a piping up to 5, the longest stitch you can. Place the fabric the right way up. Put the piping in line. Now I didn't make this piping, so I'm just going to have to make it do what I want it to do, and it looks like it gets sewn in from here. So there's a little nick here which I'm going to place the end of the piping on, and then I'm going to carefully sew it all in place. It's going to lift the foot up and pop that down, put all the edges together like that, and just sew into place. I usually sew the piping into the corner. It wasn't done with this, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. I just prefer to sew it. It holds everything where I want it to go. If you're using old piping, just make sure all the old thread's been removed. Slightly wider than I would normally do it, but I'm sure it's going to work out. Now as you come to the corner, just kind of flatten it out slightly. Any loose bits, pull them out as you go. See, that's better than just doing it in one go. I'm coming to the first rounded corner. Lay the piping down, and I'm going to pinch this pleat in just a little bit better than it was, and round the piping onto it like this. Carry on going to the next rounded corner, then just work your way on. And the second corner, just like the first, pinch the folds in slightly and make the piping go around it. And I'm scraping all the rubbish off as I go. And then just work your way down to the bottom edge. And you should, with a bit of luck, finish on that mark that you put in there. And I say a bit of luck, sometimes it walks depending on the fabrics. The original fabric was velvet, more likely to walk than the one I'm using. And I'm just about there actually, just about where I thought it would be. A little bit over, but not by very much. Now I've got the first side in like this. I'm going to put the second side facing up, and I'm going to put the side I've just done into position. Line up my little nicks that I had at the start, which are there. Should all line up well together. Place it underneath the foot like that. And I'm just going to start sewing it into place, so everything should be in line like this. Now I tend to push it through, sort of hold it and push it and pull it, just glide it through as evenly as you can. Now Make sure your patterns line up. You can with this fabric. Pull it and make it fit so it's nice and even. Pull this round. So start putting the corner in. On here, what I need to do is make sure that I've pulled the pleat in like that. I'm going to lay the other pleat on top. Sometimes this doesn't all sew in, and I'll show you what to do if it doesn't sew in because it's quite thick. So I'm just going to carry on going around and push that all down and in like this. It's going to do small stitches, so that's okay, so long as the pleats are on top of each other or as close to. Now it's done really big stitches here. I'm going to just make sure that this pattern lines up with the one underneath so it's equal, otherwise we won't go into the pleat on the other side. Remove any loose stitches. You want the center pattern to be on top of the center pattern or as close to. Pull that and carry on going. Sometimes you'll find that the bottom or the top doesn't quite go in as you want it to, so you just got to pull it and push it and it should sort itself out. Make sure the second pleat is in as much as you can and then sew towards the end. Again, line up your necks like that. Make sure that this fabric is down and in place. For finishing, put a little bit of tension and sew to the end. Make sure that all the rough edges are together. Sew to the end. Change your foot back to the plate. I said to you that the corners might not pull in properly, and I just line my stitching up with that, and it's usually just enough. So I'm basically going to just overstitch with a plain foot. Reverse and then start. And do that on both sides. You just got a little bit of extra stitching there, just holds everything. Again, just overstitch where you started. Make sure you reverse a little bit and then carry on going around. I have my zip in place, and all I'm going to do is put my zipper on, which is a little bit awkward. I match up the best I can. The best end is this one. That looks more even. I have to do it upside down, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the slider that way, and you pop it down like that, and then you peel back the other side and you pop that in like that. Oops, and now that side slipped out. I'm going to try it the other way around, see if I can see what I'm doing. So start again. Having lined that one up, I've got maybe 3 or 4 teeth that I can lose on that side, so I'm going to just pop that one on like that to about there, and that one on like that to about there, and hopefully that will just pull into place. And it does, and there's like 3 or 4 teeth at the top, and I'm going to just pull it all the way along and off the other side, and the reason is it's closed. And then I'm going to just put this slider back on this end, and hopefully I'll get it exactly, and you have to unroll it slightly. Hopefully I'll get it exactly where I want it again. That looks about right. And then I'm just going to pull it down again. Yeah, it looks like it's actually in line there, and as I pull that in, it's closed. Now here comes the fun part, because I did actually turn it the right way around, and I really don't want it the right way around. So I'm going to undo some of it so that I can pop this seam back out, and I need to seal that seam, and I need to seal the seam on the other side too. All I'm going to do is follow my stitch line down across my piping, and I believe most of this piping is going to disappear into the new hem at the bottom. I've got it on a 3.5, and just down towards here will be fine. You don't have to go across, because we'll be doing that in a minute. And back. I'm going to pin that so it doesn't unravel any more than it has to. Put that pin in there to stop it unraveling. Now it shouldn't go further than there. Open the zipper end, and I'm going to run this seam here along the seam of the zip so it's nice and even. And then you just pull the zip closed a little bit more. Makes it easier. Pull your cover out at right angles like that. I'm going to just sew across just above where I nicked it, and that should hold all of the piping into place. I shouldn't have to worry about anything. In this case, I'm going to put the zipper down so that I can see what I'm doing on the top end, because that's a bit crucial. Pull it all out as close to a 45 as you possibly can from the corner seam so it's nice and even. The nick is here and I want to be on the inside of that nick by maybe a foot width actually. So just move that up a bit. Reverse. Forward again, over everything but carefully. Then reverse because you want it sealed. And that's what happens when you don't do it carefully. If it does that, just turn your machine off and back on. And then straight across to the other corner and reverse. And there you have one of your corners in place. I actually messed up as I pulled this side off to turn it the right way around. My fingers slipped and I ended up pulling the whole zip apart. So I'm going to just realign my zip on here because I had to slide the zipper off to close it. So I'm just going to pull it over and I'm going to remember that the first hook on this line is that side. I usually prefer to have it on my left hand side, but I couldn't choose that this time. Pull it open like that, line my zipper up. I don't really have enough room. I could have put the zip on before I'd actually sewn the two parts together, which would really have been the wisest thing, but I was thinking of other things when I started this project, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 goes, so don't be upset. I've managed to get it on and the extra tooth is on that side, so I'm just going to pull that like that to about 4 or 5 inches in, and then I'm just going to pull the rest apart, and that can come all the way to the previous side that I had sewn in. My mistake, but I'd much rather show you that I make mistakes because otherwise it looks like I know what I'm doing all of the time. You know, even after 25 years I still do things wrong. I'm just going to pull that one through like that, push the zip very carefully back into position, and again I'm going to just slide the original seam under my straight foot and sew towards the end, and that will hold everything I need into place. Just reverse. Now it doesn't go all the way to the end because I need to make sure that it opens flat, but it's far enough down that when I open my zip like this I have enough seam to hold everything in place. And here again I'm going to put this seam against the teeth like that, which means it's going to knock it slightly over, and that's okay. I'm going to also put the zip down, make sure that's 45 degrees out and as even as you can make it. And here again I'm going to sew a foot width inside the notch here so that it gives enough base to the cushion. Forward and reverse. Well, that doesn't look very good. I didn't do this very well. I'm going to have to unstitch because some of the piping got caught on the wrong side, but that's an easy fix. I'm going to just do that now. Better to do it than try to cut it out later. And then I found a seam ripper the other day, which makes life a lot easier. Pull that seam out. Hopefully I'll get the stitches and not the piping. I'd much rather you know that I do make mistakes than to do everything in a way that you think, oh well, that's perfect, because it's off-putting if somebody's always doing it right and you get things wrong. And I always think that sometimes teachers also have to say, I did something wrong. It makes us more human. I've undone that, make sure the piping is all going the right way. Change my foot so it's more secure. Slide that underneath. I'm going to make sure everything's where it should be here, which it is. Sew as far down towards this zip as I possibly can. There we go. Now I'm going to change my foot out and start again. So basically I'm going to pull my seam out to the corner that it would have come to if I'd sewn it in, which is there. Just straighten all of that out, and it actually, that might mean that it goes in slightly differently this time. Roll the seam and the zip on top of each other, lay everything out as flat as I can. I need to just catch it inside of that notch, and that will catch all of the piping in the right position. So forward, back, forward, reverse, but do it slowly, all the way to the other side, and reverse again. The zip has turned over slightly. All I'm going to do here, because we'll be resewing it, I'm just going to remove those stitches and pull it out. Trim back to about 1/2 inch away from the stitching. Pull the piece over again, just so that it covers the stitches. Lay this over the top. Zips, if there's too much pressure on them, will just undo. Thank you for joining me with this project. I hope you realise that you can pick and choose which bits of an upholstery project you want to do. In this case we repaired one of the legs and gave new life to the old seat cushion, back cushion and lumbar. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, hit the bell button if you want to see more from me, and a couple of thumbs up would be really appreciated, and then I can see how well I'm doing. Take care. See you later. Ciao. Just make sure all of your... Really, cat?